Sergeant Kethvar stood at attention as the transport ship docked with Training Station Omega-7. His four arms remained perfectly still while his large black eyes watched the airlock cycle through its opening sequence. Today marked the first time a human would join the Galactic Defense Initiative training program. The massive Zentari had trained recruits from 43 different species over his 20-year career. He had worked with the gentle plant-like Valdorians who spoke in whispers and needed special soil to sleep in. He had guided the crystal beings called Shektar who thought in pure mathematics and glowed different colors when they felt emotions. He had even managed to teach combat tactics to the Nethmol, who existed as living clouds of gas, and had to wear special containment suits just to interact with solid beings. But humans were different. The briefing files made that very clear. The airlock hissed open and Kethvar expected to see a large, intimidating creature step through. The reports had called Earth a Class 1-2 Deathworld. Only 3 other planets in the galaxy carried that designation. The beings that came from such places were usually massive predators with natural weapons and thick armor plating. Instead, a small figure walked into the station corridor. She barely reached Kethvar's lower chest plates. Her skin was pale with strange dark marks covering her arms and neck. Her hair was short and black, and her eyes moved constantly, scanning everything around her like she expected danger from any direction. "Recruit reporting for duty, sir," she said in a clear voice. "Tara Morrison, call sign Dirt." Kethvar looked down at his datapad. "You are the human representative?" "Yes, sir." He checked the file again. Age 19, standard years. Born in something called the Australian Exclusion Zone. Military Academy graduate with honors. The photo matched, but she looked so small and fragile. "Follow me, Recruit Morrison. I will show you to your quarters and introduce you to your training unit." They walked through the station corridors. Tara moved quietly beside him, but Kethvar noticed she never looked straight ahead. Her eyes constantly shifted from side to side, checking doorways and alcoves. Her head tilted slightly every few seconds, like she was listening for sounds he could not hear. "Is this your first time off your home world?" Kethvar asked. "No, sir. I've been to Mars and the Europa mining station, but this is my first time working with non-human species." "And what do you think of our station?" Tara was quiet for a moment. "It's very bright, sir. And clean. The air recycling system is efficient, but the filters could be better. There are no backup escape routes in this corridor section. The artificial gravity feels lighter than Earth standard." Kethvar stopped walking. Most recruits commented on how large the station was, or how advanced the technology looked. Tara had analyzed the station's defensive weaknesses and life support systems within minutes of arriving. "How do you know about our air filters?" he asked. "The smell, sir. I can tell what metals they use, and how often they're cleaned. Also, there's a slight vibration in the deck plates that suggests the backup generators are running at 60% capacity instead of standby mode." Kethvar made a note on his datapad. The backup generators were indeed running higher than normal due to a minor malfunction. The engineering staff had not mentioned any problems with the air filters, but he would have them checked. They reached the training bay where the other recruits waited. 5 beings stood in a loose formation near the equipment lockers. Kethvar had worked with this group for 2 weeks already. "Attention," he called out. "I want you to meet your new team member." The Valdorian recruit, who looked like a walking tree with arms, swayed slightly as Tara approached. The Shektar's crystal body shifted from blue to yellow, indicating curiosity mixed with caution. The 2 Nethmol in their containment suits moved closer together, their gas clouds swirling in nervous patterns. "This is Tara Morrison from Earth," Kethvar announced. "She will be joining our combat training program." Tara nodded to each of them. "Hello. Looking forward to working with you." The Valdorian made a soft whistling sound that served as their species greeting. The Shektar flashed green, which meant acknowledgement. The Nethmol whispered something in their gaseous language that the translation software rendered as, "Welcome, small hard one." Kethvar gestured toward the weapons locker. "Morrison, select your training equipment. We will begin with basic energy weapon familiarization." Tara walked to the locker and examined the selection of practice weapons. Standard galactic design. Energy-based. Non-lethal settings only. She picked up a basic rifle and tested its weight and balance. Her hands moved over the weapon with practiced ease, finding the safety mechanism, charge indicator, and sight adjustment without looking at the instruction manual. "This is similar to a plasma rifle," she said. "Charge rate looks good. Sight alignment needs adjustment. The trigger pull is heavier than Earth weapons, but manageable." "You are familiar with energy weapons?" Kethvar asked. "Yes, sir. We used similar designs during war games in the academy, though ours were usually set to higher power levels." The Shektar flashed red, indicating alarm. "Higher power? These weapons are calibrated for maximum training safety." Terra looked at the crystal being with confusion. "Sir, how do you train for real combat if the weapons don't simulate actual damage potential?" Kethvar felt his chest plates tighten slightly. This was going to be more complicated than he had thought. "Morrison, these weapons provide adequate training for combat scenarios. Real weapons would be dangerous during practice exercises. But sir, if you train with safe equipment, how do you learn to handle the stress and consequences of actual combat?" The question hung in the air. Around the galaxy, military training focused on tactics, coordination, and proper procedure. The idea of deliberately introducing real danger into training exercises seemed primitive and dangerous. "We will discuss training philosophy later," Kethvar said finally. "For now, let us begin with basic weapon handling exercises." Terra nodded and took her position in the formation, but Kethvar noticed she held the practice weapon like it was a real threat, with proper muzzle discipline and finger placement that suggested extensive experience with actual combat weapons. As they began the first exercise, he wondered what kind of world produced soldiers who expected their training to be genuinely dangerous. The briefing files had mentioned that Earth was a hostile environment, but he was beginning to suspect the reports had not adequately prepared him for just how different human military culture might be. Terra followed every instruction perfectly, but her eyes never stopped moving, and she never completely relaxed her guard. Even during a simple weapons demonstration, she acted like she was in actual combat. Perhaps tomorrow's exercises would help him understand what kind of training humans actually required. 3 days into advanced training, Kethvar began to understand that Terra Morrison was not like any recruit he had ever trained. The problem was not that she could not follow orders. The problem was that she followed orders too well, then added her own improvements. "Today we will practice urban warfare scenarios," Kethvar announced to his training unit. "The situation is a hostage rescue in a civilian area. Remember the 3 primary rules: minimal property damage, no harm to civilians, and non-lethal force only." The training facility had been set up to look like a small city district. Fake buildings lined narrow streets. Holographic civilians moved through the area following programmed patterns. At the center, robotic enemies held 3 hostages in a fortified building. "Each team will approach from different directions," Kethvar explained. "Coordinate your movements. Use proper communication protocols. The goal is to neutralize the targets and rescue the hostages with minimal complications." The Valdorian team moved first. They approached slowly, trying to negotiate with the robotic enemies through their external speakers. When that failed, they used sleep gas delivered through the ventilation system. Clean, quiet, and safe for everyone involved. The Shektar team calculated the best angles for their energy weapons, then used precisely aimed shots to disable the robot's motor functions. Efficient and mathematically perfect. The Nethmal team slipped through small openings and overwhelmed the robots with their gaseous forms, quick and creative. Then came Terra's turn. She studied the building layout for 30 seconds, then disappeared into a supply room. When she emerged 5 minutes later, she carried a bag of cleaning supplies and some wire she had pulled from a wall panel. "Morrison, what are you doing?" Kethvar asked through the communication system. "Making breaching charges, sir," she replied, as if this was obvious. "Breaching charges? From cleaning supplies?" "Yes, sir. Basic chemistry. Ammonia-based cleaner plus peroxide-based sanitizer creates an unstable compound. Add some metal fragments for shrapnel effect. The wire serves as a delayed detonator using electrical current from the building's power supply." Kethvar felt his stomach plates clench. "Morrison, this is a rescue scenario. You cannot use explosives. Sir, the quickest way to ensure hostage safety is to eliminate the enemy threat immediately. A coordinated breach through multiple walls will create maximum confusion and minimize enemy response time. The goal is minimal property damage. Sir, respectfully, property damage is irrelevant if the hostages die while we're being careful about furniture. Before Kethvar could respond, Tara had attached her improvised charges to 3 different walls of the target building. The explosions were smaller than he had feared, but they still blasted 3 holes in the structure simultaneously. Tara rolled through the largest opening while smoke and debris were still falling. The exercise was over in 12 seconds. The robotic enemies never had time to harm the hostages because Tara had neutralized them before they could react to the breach. She had also somehow managed to shield the hostages from the explosions using overturned furniture. Mission complete, sir. Tara reported through her radio. All hostages secure. Enemy forces neutralized. No civilian casualties. Kethvar stared at the smoking holes in his training facility. Morrison, report to the debriefing room immediately. During debriefing, the other recruits sat quietly while Kethvar tried to explain proper procedure to Tara. She listened politely, but he could tell she did not understand why anyone would choose slower, more complex methods when faster, more direct approaches were available. The goal of military action is to complete the mission, Tara said when he finished his lecture. These hostages would be alive and safe. The enemies would be stopped. The civilians in the area would no longer be in danger. I don't understand why property damage to empty buildings matters more than speed and effectiveness. The Valdorian recruit made a nervous whistling sound. But what about the psychological trauma of sudden explosions? What about the environmental impact of the chemical compounds? What about the political implications of using excessive force? Tara looked genuinely confused. Sir, with respect, the psychological trauma of watching hostages die while we negotiate seems worse than loud noises. The environmental impact of a few cleaning chemicals seems minor compared to allowing armed enemies to remain active in a civilian area. And I'm not sure what politics have to do with saving lives. Kethvar realized that Tara was not being difficult or rebellious. She genuinely believed that her approach was correct. More disturbing, her results were hard to argue with. Her method had been faster, more effective, and had actually resulted in fewer simulated casualties than the other team's approaches. The next day, he tried a different exercise. A food convoy needed protection while traveling through hostile territory. Standard procedure called for defensive formations, advanced scouting, and prepared retreat routes. Tara surveyed the convoy vehicles and immediately began modifying them. Morrison, what are you doing now? Improving defensive capabilities, sir. These cargo pods can be repositioned to create better armor coverage. If we remove the rear seating area, we can install a makeshift weapons platform using the vehicle's power supply. And if we drain the coolant from the engine system, we can use it as a chemical weapon if we get surrounded. You want to weaponize the convoy vehicles? Sir, the best defense is offense. If we can eliminate threats quickly, we don't need to worry about protecting the cargo. Also, I noticed the food supplies include several items that can be combined to create smoke screens and flashbang effects. By this point, the other recruits were actively afraid to be near Tara during exercises. The Valdorian had requested transfer to a different unit. The Shektar kept flashing nervous orange colors whenever Tara spoke. The Nethmul had started whispering among themselves in their own language, which the translation system rendered as worried, muttering about the terrifying small predator. That evening, Kethvar called Tara to his office for a private conversation. Morrison, I need to understand something about human military training. What exactly did they teach you at your academy? Tara sat up straighter. Standard subjects, sir. Tactics, weapons, survival, leadership, and combat engineering, plus some specialized courses in unconventional warfare and survival psychology. And they encouraged you to make explosives from cleaning supplies? Sir, improvised weapons and field-expedient munitions are basic skills. Any soldier should be able to create effective weapons from available materials. Our instructors said that fancy equipment fails, but human creativity and determination never do. Kethvar looked at his notes from the past week. Tara's methods were unorthodox, but her results were remarkable. She completed every objective faster than the other teams. Her casualty rates were lower. Her resource efficiency was higher. The problem was that her approaches terrified everyone else. Morrison, can you explain why you treat every exercise like a real combat situation? Tara looked puzzled by the question. Sir, isn't that the point of training? To prepare for real combat? If we practice with safe methods and limited tools, how will we be ready when facing actual enemies who won't follow safety protocols? Kethvar suddenly understood the fundamental disconnect. In galactic civilization, military conflicts were formal affairs with established rules. Weapons had built-in safety features. Battles happened in designated areas away from civilians. The concept of total war, where anything could be used as a weapon and any method was acceptable if it saved lives, was completely foreign. To Tara, their training exercises were inadequate preparation for real threats. She was compensating by treating everything as potentially lethal, because anything less would be failing to prepare properly. The question was, who was right about how wars should be fought? The attack came during sleep cycle, exactly as Kethvar had planned it. This was a standard exercise used throughout the Galactic Defense Initiative to test recruit reaction times and decision-making under pressure. Instructors wearing bright orange training armor would storm the barracks using non-lethal stun weapons. Recruits were expected to follow proper defensive protocols. Take cover, establish communication, wait for orders, and engage only when necessary. Kethvar monitored the exercise from the command center, watching multiple camera feeds as his training staff moved through the station corridors. The orange armor made them clearly identifiable as friendly forces conducting a drill. Standard procedure for recruits was to treat this as a learning experience, not a real threat. The first team hit the Valdorian quarters. As expected, the plant-like beings immediately attempted diplomatic contact, asking the attackers to explain their intentions. When that failed, they retreated to a defensive position and called for help through proper communication channels. Textbook response. The second team engaged the Shektar. The crystal beings analyzed the situation mathematically, calculated optimal defensive positions, and used coordinated energy weapon fire to disable the training weapons of the enemy force. Efficient and effective within established parameters. The third team found the Nethmul already awake and alert. The gaseous beings used their natural advantages to confuse the attackers while avoiding direct confrontation. Creative but safe. The fourth team reached the human quarters and found Tara's room empty. Team 4, report status. Kethvar spoke into his communication device. Command, the human recruit is not in her assigned quarters. No sign of struggle or forced entry. She's just gone. Kethvar frowned. Perhaps Tara had been using the bathroom facilities when the exercise began. Continue sweep pattern. She's probably hiding somewhere nearby. But as minutes passed, the reports from his training staff became increasingly concerning. Command, Team 2 is down. Repeat, Team 2 is down. Unknown assailant used some kind of chemical irritant. Our suits are compromised. Team 1 reporting. Johnson and Smith are unconscious. Appears to be some kind of improvised gas attack through the ventilation system. Team 3, we've lost Korvax and Williams. They're alive but completely incapacitated. Someone turned the corridor lighting into strobing effect and used the confusion to attack with improvised weapons. Kethvar realized what was happening. All teams, be advised. The human recruit is treating this as a real combat situation. She has not recognized the orange armor as friendly identification. Command, that's impossible. The orange armor is universal training standard. Every species recognizes it as non-hostile. More reports came in. Tara had somehow acquired the station's maintenance access codes and was using the service tunnels to move undetected. She had created tear gas from kitchen chemicals and deployed it through the air recycling system. She had reprogrammed the lighting controls to create disorienting strobe effects. She had even turned a food replicator into some kind of projectile launcher. Command, we need backup. This recruit is systematically dismantling our entire exercise force. Kethvar left the command center and joined the search himself. He found signs of Terra's passage everywhere. Unconscious instructors, improvised weapons, modified station systems. She was treating the entire station as hostile territory, and every person in orange armor as an enemy combatant. He finally cornered her in the ventilation system above the main corridor. She had been using the ducts to move around the station and deploy various chemical weapons she had created from cleaning supplies and food additives. "Morrison," he shouted up at the ceiling access panel. "This is Sergeant HFY. You will come down immediately." A section of ceiling tiles shifted, and Terra's face appeared. Her eyes reflected the emergency lighting like a nocturnal predator. Her face was streaked with grease and chemical residue. She held what appeared to be a makeshift smoke grenade in one hand. "Sir, I have disabled approximately 60% of the enemy force," she reported calmly. "Recommend immediate counterattack while they are disorganized." "Morrison, these are not enemies. They are training instructors wearing orange identification armor." Terra dropped down from the ceiling, landing silently on the deck plates. "Sir." Respectfully, orange armor provides poor camouflage but excellent target identification. It was helpful for tracking enemy movement patterns. HFY felt his chest plates expanding and contracting rapidly as his species equivalent of hyperventilation. "Morrison, this is training, not a war." Terra looked at him with an expression he had never seen before. Her eyes were alert and focused. But there was something deeper behind them, something that suggested she had been holding back during all their previous exercises. "You're wrong," she said quietly. The corridor fell silent, except for the groaning of unconscious training instructors scattered around them. "Sir, with respect, you just don't recognize war when it's being polite." Terra continued. "On Earth, we have a saying, the enemy gets a vote. It means that real opponents won't follow your rules, use your equipment, or limit themselves to your expectations. They will use every advantage available to kill you as quickly and efficiently as possible." HFY looked around at his disabled training staff. This was supposed to be a simple reaction time test. "Sir, you sent armed figures in concealing clothing to attack sleeping soldiers during a vulnerable period. On Earth, that's called an assassination attempt. The appropriate response is to eliminate the threat using whatever means necessary. But the orange armor clearly identifies them as friendly forces conducting a training exercise." Terra tilted her head slightly. "Sir, enemy forces often wear identifying uniforms to confuse defenders. Color coding means nothing to someone who wants to kill you. The only reliable identification is behavior, and their behavior was consistent with hostile assault." HFY began to understand the magnitude of the cultural gap between them. In galactic civilization, military conflicts followed established rules. Weapons, uniforms, and tactics were standardized across species. The idea that someone might deliberately break these conventions to gain advantage was considered unsportsmanlike. But Terra came from a world where survival meant assuming the worst about every potential threat, where enemies would lie, cheat, and use any deception necessary to win, where military training had to prepare soldiers for opponents who would follow no rules except victory. "Morrison, how many of my instructors did you injure?" "None permanently, sir. I used non-lethal methods throughout the engagement, though several will have headaches from the gas exposure, and Instructor Williams may need medical attention for the electrical shock from the modified door panel." HFY checked his communication device. The medical team reported that all injuries were indeed minor. Somehow, Terra had disabled a force of trained military instructors without causing any lasting harm. "How did you know how to do all this?" Terra looked confused by the question. "Sir, this is basic defensive tactics. Any soldier should be able to secure a position using available resources. I was actually holding back significantly because I didn't want to cause permanent damage to your staff." "Holding back?" "Yes, sir. On Earth, enemy forces wouldn't wear bright identification colors and use non-lethal weapons. Real combat would require much more aggressive responses." HFY realized that Terra had been treating all their previous exercises the same way. She had been deliberately limiting herself because she thought galactic military standards were inadequate preparation for actual warfare. The disturbing question was, what if she was right? Kethvar sat across from Terra in the medical bay, while his unconscious instructors received treatment. The medical staff moved efficiently between the beds, treating chemical exposure, electrical shock, and various impact injuries. None of the injuries were serious, but Kethvar had never seen so many training casualties from a single exercise. "Morrison, I need you to explain something to me," he said finally. "What exactly constitutes military training on Earth?" Men, Terra straightened in her chair. "Standard basic training is 13 weeks, sir. Physical conditioning, weapons familiarization, combat tactics, survival skills, and psychological preparation." "And how many recruits are injured during this training?" "Sir, injury rates vary by program. Basic training usually has about a 15% injury rate, requiring medical attention. Advanced combat training runs higher, maybe 25%. Special operations training can reach 40% casualty rates." Kethvar felt his stomach plates clench. "Casualty rates? You mean recruits die during training?" "Sometimes, sir. Though that's relatively rare in peacetime training. Maybe 1 or 2 deaths per 1,000 recruits. But injuries are expected. You can't train for real combat without real risk." The concept was completely alien to Kethvar. Galactic military training had injury rates below 1%. And deaths during training were so rare. They required investigation by multiple oversight committees. "Morrison, describe a typical training exercise from your academy." Terra considered for a moment. "Last year we did a 2-week survival exercise in the Australian exclusion zone. 40 recruits were dropped into contaminated wilderness with basic equipment and told to reach an extraction point 200 kilometers away. The area has radioactive zones, aggressive wildlife, extreme weather, and limited clean water sources." "And this was considered normal training?" "Yes, sir. It's designed to simulate being cut off behind enemy lines with minimal resources. We had to navigate using basic tools. Find or purify water, avoid dangerous animals, and deal with radiation exposure while maintaining unit cohesion and completing the mission." Kethvar made notes on his datapad. "How many recruits completed this exercise successfully?" 28 made it to extraction on time and in good condition. 8 required medical evacuation for various injuries or radiation exposure. 4 were eliminated for psychological breakdown under stress. Eliminated? They couldn't handle the pressure and had to be removed from the program. Military service isn't for everyone, sir. It's better to find out during training than during actual combat. The medical staff finished treating the last instructor and began filing their reports. Kethvar noticed they kept glancing nervously at Terra while they worked. Word had already spread through the station about the human recruit who had single-handedly defeated an entire training exercise. "Morrison, what kind of wildlife exists in this exclusion zone?" Terra's expression became more animated. "Mostly standard Australian fauna, sir, but with some genetic modifications from the radiation exposure. Drop bears are still the primary threat. They're marsupials that ambush prey from tree branches. Box jellies in the water sources, though they're easier to avoid than the land predators. Some of the spider species have grown larger than normal, and there are packs of wild dogs that learn to coordinate hunting strategies." The Valdorian recruit, who was receiving treatment for chemical exposure, made a distressed whistling sound. "Predators that hunt in coordinated packs?" "Yes, sir. That's why we learned pack tactics ourselves. When you're outnumbered by intelligent predators, you need to be smarter and more organized than they are." Kethvar realized he was beginning to understand Terra's perspective. "Morrison, how does Earth military doctrine differ from what you've observed here?" "Sir, Galactic military doctrine seems focused on minimizing conflict and following established rules. Earth doctrine is based on winning at any cost while protecting your people. We assume enemies will cheat, lie, and use any advantage they can find. So, we train to do the same. But what about concepts like proportional response, civilian protection, and diplomatic solutions?" Terra looked genuinely puzzled. "Sir, those are important during peacetime negotiations. But once shooting starts, the only priority is stopping the enemy before they kill your people. Diplomatic solutions happen before wars begin or after wars end. During combat, hesitation gets people killed. A communication alert sounded in the medical bay. Kethvar activated his datapad and read the incoming message. His chest plates went rigid as he processed the information. Morrison, you should see this. He transferred the message to a wall display. Intelligence reports from the Galactic Rim showed images of destroyed colony worlds. Entire planets stripped of all organic life. Cities reduced to empty metal frameworks. No survivors found anywhere. What am I looking at, sir? First contact with an unknown species, Kethvar said grimly. They appeared 3 weeks ago at the Outer Rim colonies. Intelligence is calling them the Devourers. They seem to consume all biological matter they encounter. Terra studied the images with professional interest. Standard biological warfare approach. Efficient resource acquisition. No apparent interest in communication or negotiation. Biological warfare? Sir, these patterns suggest a species that evolved to consume other life forms for survival. They probably don't understand concepts like diplomacy or surrender, because those ideas never provided evolutionary advantage in their development. More images appeared on the display. Fleet formations of organic-looking ships that moved like living creatures. Weapons that dissolved matter at the molecular level. Tactics that showed complete disregard for any conventional military doctrine. Our defense forces engaged them at 3 different systems, Kethvar continued reading. All engagements resulted in complete defeat of galactic forces. Enemy casualties appear to be 0. Terra leaned forward to study the tactical reports. Sir, your forces used standard formation attacks with energy weapons and coordinated fleet movements. Yes, those are proven effective tactics against all known species. Sir, these enemies don't follow standard patterns. Look at their ship movements. They're using swarm tactics like insects, and their weapons seem designed to destroy rather than disable. Your forces were fighting by rules that the enemy ignored completely. Kethvar felt a cold realization settling over him. Morrison, if these Devourers continue their advance toward the core systems, how would Earth forces respond to this threat? Doc, Terra was quiet for a long moment, studying the intelligence reports. When she spoke, her voice was calm but serious. Sir, Earth would treat this as an extinction-level threat. We would use every weapon available. Ignore all previous treaties, limiting military action, and focus entirely on destroying the enemy's ability to continue operations. We would assume they cannot be negotiated with, reasoned with, or defeated through conventional methods. And if conventional weapons proved ineffective, then we would use unconventional weapons. Biological warfare, psychological operations, environmental manipulation, civilian militia, guerrilla tactics, and if necessary, mutually assured destruction. The medical bay fell silent. Even the other recruits receiving treatment stopped talking to listen. Morrison, would Earth forces win against this enemy? Terra looked at the tactical reports again. I don't know, sir. But we would make them pay such a high price that they would regret starting the fight. And we would never stop fighting until either they were destroyed or we were. Kethvar understood now why Terra had been so frustrated with their training exercises. She came from a military tradition that prepared for total war against enemies who followed no rules. The galactic military tradition was based on limited conflicts between civilized species who shared common values. The Devourers clearly belonged to Terra's category of enemy rather than the galaxy's. Sir, Terra said quietly, if you want my opinion, your current training standards won't prepare anyone to fight these creatures. You need to change your entire approach to warfare. Kethvar looked around the medical bay at his injured instructors, then at the intelligence reports showing the complete destruction of 3 entire star systems. For the first time in his career, he was beginning to think a human might be right about military strategy. 2 weeks later, Kethvar stood in the same training bay where he had first introduced Terra to his unit, but everything had changed. The equipment lockers now contained real weapons alongside training versions. The scenario setups included multiple backup plans and emergency protocols. and the recruits moved with the same predatory alertness that had originally marked Terra as dangerous. The transformation had not been easy. After reviewing the intelligence reports about the Devourers, Galactic Command had authorized immediate changes to all military training programs. HFY had been given authority to implement Deathworld protocols based on human military doctrine. The decision came with significant resistance from traditional military leadership, but the destruction of 6 more colony systems had ended most arguments. Terra stood beside him now, wearing the silver insignia of assistant instructor. The promotion had been unprecedented. No recruit had ever advanced to teaching position during their first training cycle, but her expertise was desperately needed. Today we will practice defensive operations under extreme threat conditions, Terra announced to the assembled recruits. The enemy will not follow conventional rules. They will not use standard weapons or tactics. They will not show mercy or accept surrender. The training unit had expanded to include representatives from 12 different species. Word about human military methods had spread throughout the galactic military, and experienced officers were requesting transfer to the program. The original recruits had adapted well, though the psychological adjustment had been difficult. The Valdorian recruit, now called Bark by his unit members, had learned to use aggressive tactics while maintaining his species' natural diplomatic skills. He served as the unit's negotiator and psychological operations specialist. The Shektar crystal, being called Prism, had adapted her mathematical analysis skills to chaos theory and unpredictable enemy behavior. She could now calculate optimal responses to irrational threats. The Nethmal pair, nicknamed Smoke and Haze, had become expert infiltration specialists, using their gaseous nature to penetrate enemy positions and gather intelligence. Remember, Terra continued, the enemy will try to use your own strengths against you. They will exploit your hesitation, your desire to protect civilians, and your adherence to rules they do not follow. You must be prepared to act without hesitation when lives are at stake. HFY activated the training scenario. Unlike the old exercises, this one was designed to be genuinely difficult and dangerous. The training weapons were set to painful but non-lethal levels. The enemy robots used unpredictable tactics and showed no concern for conventional military doctrine. Failure meant real consequences. Begin exercise, Terra called out. The recruits moved with purpose and coordination that would have been impossible under the old training system. Bark immediately began psychological analysis of the enemy positions, calling out weaknesses and behavioral patterns. Prism calculated optimal attack vectors while accounting for chaos variables. Smoke and Haze infiltrated the enemy formation to gather intelligence and create confusion. The newer recruits followed protocols that Terra had adapted from Earth military doctrine. They moved in coordinated pairs, covered each other's advances, and used improvised weapons when standard equipment proved inadequate. Most importantly, they treated the exercise as if their lives actually depended on success. The exercise concluded with complete mission success and 0 simulated casualties among the recruit forces. The enemy robots had been systematically destroyed, using tactics that would have horrified galactic military leaders 6 months ago. Debriefing in Conference Room 7, Terra announced. We'll analyze performance and discuss improvements. HFY followed the group to debriefing, still amazed at the transformation he was witnessing. The recruits discussed their actions with professional competence that rivaled experienced combat veterans. They critiqued their own performance honestly and suggested improvements for future exercises. Bark, your psychological analysis was excellent, but you hesitated for 2.3 seconds before calling the enemy retreat pattern. In real combat, that hesitation could cost lives. Prism, your calculations were mathematically perfect, but you need to communicate them faster. Optimal solutions are useless if they arrive too late to implement. Smoke and Haze, outstanding infiltration work. But remember to maintain communication protocols. Intelligence is only valuable if it reaches the people who need it. After the recruits were dismissed, Terra joined HFY in his office to review the day's results and prepare reports for Galactic Command. The advancement rate is remarkable, HFY noted, reviewing the performance statistics. Recruit effectiveness has improved by 300% since implementing human training protocols. Yes, sir. But we're still not where we need to be, Terra replied. Real combat against the Devourers will be harder than anything we can simulate safely. These recruits are improving fast, but they'll need more experience with chaos and genuine unpredictability. Kethvar filed his daily report with Galactic Command, recommending expansion of the program to additional training facilities. Intelligence reports continued to show Devourer forces advancing toward more populated systems. The galaxy was going to need every trained soldier it could produce. Terra. I have a question that's been troubling me, he said. When you first arrived, you seemed frustrated that our training wasn't adequate for real combat. Did you know something like the Devourers was coming? Terra considered the question carefully. No, sir. I had no specific intelligence about this threat. But on Earth, we have a saying: hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Human history includes many examples of civilizations that were destroyed because they prepared only for the threats they expected. So you train for unknown dangers? Sir, the most dangerous enemies are always the ones you haven't thought of yet. Earth military doctrine assumes that future threats will be worse than current threats, and will use methods we haven't encountered before. We train people to adapt and overcome unexpected challenges, rather than just follow predetermined responses. Kethvar's communication device alerted him to an incoming message from Galactic Command. He read the orders quickly, then looked up at Terra with surprise. Morrison, you've been promoted to training coordinator for the Outer Rim Defense Initiative. They want you to establish human-based training programs at 47 different military facilities. You'll have authority over curriculum development and instructor certification for the entire region. Terra stood and saluted. Sir, I request permission to maintain active training status. I don't want to become just an administrator. Granted. You'll continue hands-on instruction while overseeing the program expansion. After Terra left to prepare for her new assignment, Kethvar completed his final report for the day. 6 months ago, he had been a standard military instructor following procedures that had worked for centuries. Now he was part of a military revolution that was changing everything about how the galaxy approached warfare. The most disturbing part was that it had taken an external threat to make them realize how unprepared they had been. The galactic military had been so focused on fighting civilized wars against civilized enemies that they had forgotten how to fight for survival against enemies who wanted nothing less than total destruction. In his report, Kethvar wrote, Recommendation: immediate integration of human combat doctrine across all GDI training facilities. Previous threat assessments severely underestimated both human capabilities and the nature of warfare itself. We have been playing games. The humans have been preparing for extinction. He paused, then added a final note. Personal observation. Recruit Morrison stated that on Earth, they have a saying: if you want peace, prepare for war. It appears the galaxy has been preparing for peace instead. This fundamental error in military philosophy may explain why our initial engagements with the Devourers were completely unsuccessful. Human military doctrine is based on the assumption that enemies will use any method necessary to win, while galactic doctrine assumes enemies will follow established rules of conflict. The Devourers clearly follow human-style warfare rather than galactic-style warfare. The next morning, Terra began training a new group of recruits from across the galaxy. Representatives from species that had never worked together before learned to coordinate their unique abilities under human military doctrine. They practiced with real weapons, faced genuine consequences for failure, and learned to treat every exercise as preparation for actual survival. Standing before her new unit, Terra delivered the same introduction she gave to every group. You are here to learn how to win wars against enemies who want to destroy everything you care about. This training will be difficult and dangerous because real combat is difficult and dangerous. We will prepare you to face threats that don't follow rules, don't show mercy, and don't care about your safety or your civilization. She looked around at the assembled beings, some confident, some nervous, all committed to learning. Some of you come from peaceful worlds where conflicts are resolved through diplomacy and compromise. That's good. Those skills matter. But when diplomacy fails and compromise isn't possible, you need to be ready to fight for survival using every advantage you can find. A young Valdorian recruit raised one of her branch-like arms. "Instructor Morrison, what if we don't want to become killers?" Tara smiled, and for the first time since arriving at the station, her expression looked genuinely warm instead of predatory. "Then we'll teach you to become protectors," she said. "The goal isn't to enjoy violence. The goal is to be so good at violence that you can protect the things that matter without having to use it very often." She gestured toward the training equipment and modified scenarios that now filled the facility. "On Earth, we have another saying. The most dangerous person is someone who doesn't want to fight but knows how. We're going to teach you to be dangerous enough that most enemies will choose not to fight you at all." As the new recruits began their first exercise, Kethvar watched from the observation deck and felt something he had never experienced before: confidence that the galaxy might actually survive what was coming. The transformation was just beginning.